everyone, welcome back to Screen Review. My name is Megan.
And I'm Dina. And before we start, make sure to go on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook and search us up and follow us at Book of Tribune.
All right, today we're going to be reviewing a 2018 movie called Sorry to Bother You, Dina's favorite movie, I will add. It is an hour and 52 minutes long, and it is rated R. So normally we give like a spoiler-free kind of review portion at the beginning, but now I think we're going to change it just to general thoughts of the movie, because spoiler-free, there's not much you can say, necessarily. So I guess, Dina, what did you think of your favorite movie? Did you like it?
Favorite movie, as we know. I think the point of this movie that I love is that it's kind of just this like very clear commentary on many things in the world. I would say capitalism, racism, the kind of the blatant like public versus government type of thing. And it's not obvious in the sense of like annoying. It's like cool, and it's like a very artistic movie. The colors are amazing, costume design amazing, really good cast. And yeah, overall very good movie, very funny, and that's all I really have to say about it.
Yeah, no, I would agree with everything you said. I mean, it's definitely satirical. It is funny. It gives like an interesting perspective on things. And like you said, like it's a pretty symbolic movie, but like in an obvious way. But you're right, not to a point where it's annoying and you're like, okay, like we get it. But it's just like cool and unique every time they bring something up or show something in a different way. It does take a little bit of an unexpected turn toward the end, but I overall really enjoyed it. I thought it was interesting, and it's unlike any movie that I've seen before. I can't exactly categorize it as a certain something because it's so unique, I feel.
Yeah, for sure. But I think that's all I have to say for non-spoiler things I like. How about you?
Yeah, that's pretty much all I have spoiler free, we'll say. So now I guess we're gonna get into the in-depth part of it. So I guess, Dina, if you want to bring us to the start of the movie, we'll go from there.
Right. So we start in this kind of very bland office type interview, a manager, and we see our main character, Cassius Green, kind of holding this little trophy in his hand during the interview. And the interviewer, like the manager, whatever that's interviewing him, is asking him about his past job experiences. And he's asking him about it, whatever, and we figure out that Cassius Green, Cash, they call him, was lying about all of his prerequisites, and the manager knew immediately but hired him anyway because he thought that gave him this spunk, like, oh, you can lie to me and like you're very creative with your lies, so I'll hire you, which is already a whole kind of commentary in itself of corruptness, I guess you could say. Mm-hmm. And so from there, we figure out he's working at this place called Regal View as a telemarketer, right? Mm-hmm. And there's like all these rules, whatever, to where he works. And they have this main rule, STTS, something like that, stick to the script. And Cash is like, okay, stick to the script. He walks out of the office, and it was a very interesting thing where the office, again, like this whole color thing, the office was like all yellow and bright colors, but also at the same time very neutral. And then the second he steps outside the office, it's like warm tones, but like, or cool tones, and like kind of darker, but also more fun looking, I guess you could say. It's very interesting. So that's our initial scene. Yeah.
Yeah, no, it definitely was interesting. So, he gets his telemarketing job, he goes back to his house. You could say he's living in his uncle's garage with his fiancée, Detroit. And so there's this kind of scene, and he's worried of, impending death and doom and the sun exploding. And he's worried that he hasn't made his mark on Earth. He doesn't have his purpose, things like that. Whereas Detroit, his fiance, has her purpose in life. She expresses herself through art, and she fights for justice in kind of pretty much every, definition of the term, you could say. So he's worried that he hasn't done anything with his life yet. That's kind of where we take it. And so this job is very, very important to him to do well. Because you also find out that his uncle is running into some money issues as well. And Cash owes him money. And there's this whole thing. And money obviously is a very big, recurring theme throughout this entire movie. And especially being that our main character's name is literally Cash. Cash is green.
Cash is green. Cash is green.
Cash is green. Again, it's very obvious in the way they do these things, but you can almost appreciate it to that sense where you don't. It's just interesting to think about. So essentially, he starts this telemarketing job, and he's not doing very well at first until one of his coworkers kind of leans in and says, hey, like, do you want a tip? Like, I've been doing this for a long time. Like, if I could help you out, here's a tip. You should use your white voice, and that way you'll make sales. You'll do better. Just, people are hearing you on the phone and they're hanging up immediately. Just pretend you don't have a care in the world. Bills are all paid for. Like, you could take the sale, you could leave the sale. It doesn't matter. Use your white voice, he calls it. And so then Cash just starts doing this and immediately finds pretty much instant success. And he starts making sales left and right and is revered throughout the whole office as being one of the better top salesmen.
Right. And so, which is already in itself, like when his coworker tells him, like, use your white voice, he kind of like makes like a funny, like, nasally voice. And they were like, and his coworker was like, no, you have to act like they wish they sounded, kind of like, again, how Megan was just saying, this carefree, whatever type of thing. And it was very interesting, and how immediately after that he got his sales. And so from there we kind of go to this scene where we kind of see this team meeting, I guess, kind of thing, where like all the workers are there, all these telemarketers are there, and they have like a new manager or something like that. And so Cash's his immediate question is like, are we going to get paid more? Because she's like kind of upping this whole like, oh, we're going to make this a better place to work, blah blah blah. And she's like, no, and starts laughing. And so immediately after that, we're kind of introduced to this character, Squeeze, right? That's his name. And he's kind of like, I liked the question you asked out there. And Cash was like, I mean, wasn't that serious?
That's a good question. I'm working here. Like, it's kind of a good question.
Yeah, I kind of wanted to know if I was going to get paid. And then so the guy Squeeze is like, me and a couple of other people are putting together a protest or a strike, for working, because we want to get paid more. And I can't remember, did Cash agree to it or not? I don't remember.
Cash kind of brushed him off at first, and I think Squeeze was like, oh, like, just, meet me out for drinks after work. Like, we can't really talk about it here. And then I think at that point later that night at dinner, it was like him, Detroit, Squeeze, and then his friend Sal that also works there. And that way I think they kind of started to convince him to join into it, despite, Cash is having this, new success, making more money, making more commission, using his white voice. I think that's how it went.
Yeah. So, and between the time of them like organizing this protest, I guess, and doing the protest, we find out that now Detroit starts working at this telemarketing place, which is very interesting to think about, because before we find out that Detroit is this artist who her other job outside of being an artist is she's a sign spinner on the side of the road, and she does it very dramatically, like very dramatically, and it's honestly very interesting to watch. It was kind of funny, but she does it very dramatically. She does these crazy moves, whatever. So it was very interesting that now she has fallen into this working for this telemarketing company. This keep in mind, these offices are very stereotypical, cubicle, desk, like, type of thing. Very boring to look at. And so now Detroit's working there. This, you thought, very artistic, very social justice, very anti everything, not anti, but I would say
very anti-conformity, at least.
Anti-conformity. So you wouldn't think that she would work there, but I guess she fell into this need of money as well. And so then a few scenes later, we see their protest, and Cash is part of it. He's one of the main people of it. They're really intense about it. They're like, basically they just put all their phones down, like, because they're telemarketers, they put all their phones down, they stand up, and they're just like, no more Regal View. Like, I hate Regal View. Well, to put it in better words.
So, make it G-rated. We hate Regal View.
Yeah, we hate Regal View. Yeah. So, and then immediately after that, Cash goes to the manager's office that he was interviewed at earlier in the movie, and Cash is freaking out, really nervous. You kind of already know at this point that he's a very anxious, very stressed person, and he's like thinking he's going to get fired, and they end up promoting him, right? And they're like, oh, your white voice is so good, essentially, which is really weird.
Exactly. Yeah. So they promote him to this thing called Power Caller, and they've been mentioned a few times throughout the movie so far, to where it's, the next step up from the telemarketing job, to where you're selling more high-end things. The commission is just like completely insane. Like, you just make a lot of money essentially for a very similar job, you could say. You're just selling high-class things. And so he gets promoted to this thing called Power Caller, and He's really excited about it. Obviously, they pop the champagne in the office. It's a huge celebration. But then, you're kind of thinking as the viewer, oh, but what about the strike he was just helping organize? What about his friends?
Right.
Like all the other things that he stood for before? He's kind of not selling out, but selling out in a sense for more money.
Yeah. And I think at this point, we should mention what's happening in the background. In the background, a very big thing in this movie, very recurring kind of scene is you see a TV screen, and the TV screen either shows this really stupid show called like I Get Kicked Out of Me, like I get like kicked or whatever. It's just a bunch of people getting punched in the face or pied or whatever. And apparently this is like one of the top shows of the world right now, which is really ridiculous in and of itself. So you switch between that, you switch between the videos of protests going on around the world in like a newscast, and you switch between this, you find out more about this program that they have going on in this different world, I guess, called Worry Free. And essentially Worry Free is these workers, they kind of are dressed like minions from Despicable Me, I noticed, which is really weird. And so there are these workers that essentially do like the jobs that no one wants to do. Like they, I don't know, they hole punch papers, and they put the bristles on a broom or whatever. Like they do really stupid jobs that anyone can, not anyone can do, but that you would think machines would do or whatever. And do they even I don't even think they get paid for those jobs, because
no, it's like you get free housing and free food for life if you sign this contract. Right, is what it is essentially.
And by free food and free housing, it's just one room, like 20 people in like these bunks where they eat on their beds, and the food itself is like mystery meat type stuff. So, that's what's going on in the background right now. And these protests are anti-worry free, because worry free, is essentially, again, kind of going back to this commentary on capitalism that this whole movie is like, worry free is essentially like no one can get paid, no one has money, like these people are struggling, so now they're doing these stupid jobs and living in fear, and not fear, but just not living good lives.
Yeah, no, it's just poor living conditions. Exactly.
Yeah.
A lot of times, like in the background on the TV, it'll show, worry-free accused of like slave labor contracts is what everyone's comparing these little contracts they make their workers sign, and how you once you're in, you can never leave. And then you see the CEO, just like this typical, like he's wearing like sandals, and he's giving an interview. He's on Oprah, and he says like, oh, like absolutely not. Like we're building like a better future, the best future. Like trust me, me. And his name is like Steve Lift or something.
And then after they show these like newscasts, like you'll see like when they go to bars, all the main characters, they'll go to bars or whatever, and you'll see the bartender just like switch the channel to that stupid show that's like people getting like punched in the face that like everyone loves for some reason. So it's very interesting to think about that.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree how they're always like switching away from it, because you don't look at that, like look at this funny stupid show instead.
Yeah, and like no one really cares, because they don't really care until it affects them, which is again a recurring theme with Cassius. Again, he was in this protest against Regal View, the company he works for, and now he's getting promoted and he's so happy about it. So
yeah, exactly.
Kind of makes you think how people don't really care about things until it affects them. And if they're doing well,
they don't care anymore. Yeah, like they don't care anymore about things that used to affect them. So he cared about the Regal View protest because it was affecting him. Now that he's promoted, he's kind of fallen off of that because, oh, well, I'm making money now. So, like, you guys got it. Like, I'll be rooting for you. He says this in his scene to his friends. He's like, oh, like, I can't really participate in the protests with you guys anymore. Like, I'm a power caller now. Like, I have other responsibilities. But I'm here for you and I'm rooting for you. But I won't be in the protest. So it's just kind of interesting to see his priorities shift throughout, one event to the next pretty instantaneously. So, as he starts his new job as a power caller, he walks into the office and immediately there's this guy, and they never say his name. They call him Mr. and then like it bleeps out. So for that fact, Mr. Bleep, Mr. Blank, we'll call him things like that. So he tells him, he's like, oh, like use your white voice here, like at all times, like not just on the phone. And so this is already a shift from what he was used to at the telemarketing place before the Regal View, the one step lower, you could say. So whereas he only had to do it on the calls, now he's doing it all the time instead. So it's just interesting to think about. And so essentially he gets kind of like a tour of the office and what they do there. And basically what he's going to be doing is he's going to be selling slave labor from worry-free to other companies is essentially what he's selling now, the upgrade of products. Before it was like, oh, like magazines and little things like that. Now he's selling slave labor. So that's kind of the shift. And of course, Cassius just does it because he's going to make money and he's doing well at it. He's the golden child of this new power caller type thing. And so in kind of the background of his life, you see him upgrading. He moves out of his uncle's garage. He moves into a new nice apartment. With a nice
uncle.
Exactly. He does. Yeah. So you see him kind of upgrading his life, but it's almost to the point where, yeah, sure, he's getting nice materialistic type things, but as a person, what's happening to him is more so what you're thinking now.
Yeah, because, you know, originally he was like, wait, so I'm selling slave labor, and then the Mr. Blank or whatever gives him this paper of all the money that he will be getting from this job and the starting salary, and he immediately is like, oh, where do I start? You know what I mean? And might I add, yeah, it sounds great. And might I add, like, to get to this like power collar kind of room, you have to go through this like golden elevator, so ridiculous and like ridiculous. So like, you know, elitist in a sense where it's like we have a golden elevator and like you have to put this like super dramatically ridiculously long like password in this like code thing. It's like
that was a hilarious scene when she's just entering in the passcode for like it's at least 45 seconds she's entering in this passcode.
Insane. So funny.
She's like it's really secure. And also, it's interesting to know that now we're mentioning this elevator. Only the power callers could use it. Even though the other telemarketers at Regalview were upstairs, they had to walk upstairs. Only the power callers could use this golden elevator.
And they pass by this golden elevator like every day.
Yeah, you walk into the building, you're looking right at the golden elevator, and you need to turn left to walk up the stairs. So it's just interesting.
Yeah, and so after this, you know, now that Cash is promoted, there's even more protests outside of Regalview. And so there's this one scene where Cash, you know, gets this power collar thing, and he has to have like a literal SWAT team help him get through these mounds of protesters outside of Regalview. And then you see the next scene after that, he's like drinking champagne. Like he walks through these protesters, goes out the door, and he's drinking champagne with all his coworkers, and they're celebrating him as to how he's this like person that's did this so well. He's such a great power caller. He's their golden boy. His white voice is amazing, and it's just like ridiculous to see how like he was like, I'm gonna back you guys up, and then, you know, is like escapes into this other world to the point where Detroit, his girlfriend, fiance, is like can you quit? Like this isn't right. This isn't good. So very interesting. And then another scene comes where, again, the next day he has to go through this protest of people. This time he's like a little distraught because Detroit was like, you got to quit. Like, this isn't good.
Yeah, like she gave him an ultimatum, essentially. She's like, if you cross that protest line today, I'm like, we're done. I'm leaving.
Yeah. So he's like really distracted. He does it anyway. But as he goes through, he gets hit in the head with a Coca-Cola can. And this girl says, like, have a cola and smile. And this, first of all, it was a Coca-Cola can. And from that, he has this, like, continuous, like, super intense bleeding in his head that he has to like, wrap a bandage around. Like, I don't know if you've ever seen a Coca-Cola can, but I don't think it could do that to you. I really don't think it could do that to you.
I don't know how hard she was throwing it, but it must have been a full can, like, with a rock tied to it. Like,
or maybe, like, it was just cut, like,
I don't know. But you're right. It was an extreme wound. Like, I don't know if it would cut you necessarily or just bruise you. But to whatever effect, he was bleeding profusely for a lot of the movie. Pretty much majority of the rest of the movie, he has his head wound.
Which in itself is, like, this whole symbol, which I don't know if we should mention it now.
Sure.
Yeah, so basically, like, throughout the rest of the movie, he kind of has this cut in his head that, like, intensifies. Like, it, like, gets really bad, and it keeps bleeding. Like, you see him after he gets the cut, like, immediately after he's, like, in the power collar, whatever, office, and, like, Mr. Blank, it, like, wipes blood away from his face. Like, it's, like, bleeding continuously. The bandage is, like, bright red, like, on his forehead. And so it kind of, like, shows this kind of, like, this is when he starts to realize that, like, he shouldn't be there, like he shouldn't be in Regalview, like it's not good that he is selling slave labor. So like it's kind of this symbol of like him in himself, like kind of getting all crazy because he's like, I just lost the love of my life for this type of
Exactly.
thing.
Yeah.
And he's kind of having this like internal battle, I guess.
Yeah, and I mean, it could also be that, as soon as he crossed that protest line, I mean, he crossed the protest line and also crossed, a moral line within himself, within his relationship, all of that. And so he immediately gets just this can to the head about it. And it's almost like a blatant symbol, for what he's done wrong. And he becomes kind of famous. Like the video of that girl throwing the Coke can at him goes viral. And so, she is widely revered and everyone loves her. They're like, oh, like you did such a good thing, like good job, like we hate them, essentially. And then Cassius is kind of ridiculed for it as the guy that got hit in the head with a cola can. And so it's almost like he's famous for that as well. He's famous for being this person that does bad things, as everyone recognizes. Like, oh, hey, aren't you the guy that got hit in the head?
Yeah, it's so ridiculous. And then so after that, we kind of see that Detroit and Cash are not together, obviously now, but Cash still finds his way to Detroit's art show, which was another, good scene. After this cola and smile thing, it like gets really intense, the movie. The whole movie's good, but like this is when like the plot thickens, I guess.
So the pickup definitely is here.
Yeah, and so you go to Detroit's art event, and Detroit herself, ironically, is using her own white voice, this like British little posh artist voice.
And I will say, like the whole time, pretty much, whenever Cassius would use his white voice around Detroit, she was like, stop it, like I don't like that, like don't say that, like you sound weird. And now it's just it's ironic that she's also using her white voice in her workplace. So it's almost like it's interesting to think about.
Yeah.
But go ahead, go on.
No. And so at her art show, she has a bunch of exhibits, whatever, and she has like this performance art part of her show where she starts saying lines from some movie, and she lets people like throw things at her. Like, what is it, like balloons filled with blood?
Yeah, it's like it's not really blood, it's dyed water, so it looks like blood. It's like cell phones, electronic parts, like things like that. Or she's letting the audience throw them at her for this, like, I guess what you're saying, interactive type art display.
Yeah, like performance art. And she kind of like subjects herself to this, and Cash is watching it. He's like, what are they doing? And so he stops it, which in itself, I was like, I would be pretty annoyed if someone stopped my performance art in the middle. So he stopped and he was like, why would you subject yourself to this? And she was like, just go away, like go home to your Regal View or whatever. And it's very interesting how, again, Cash was kind of like, he himself was like subjecting himself to this, like, first of all, he has to use his white voice, which is already like in and of itself is like this kind of racism in the workplace. And then he's like it's like this its own symbol. Detroit letting them throw things at her is a symbol for Cash letting this whole Regal View, this whole work system that he's in, throw things at him just so he can get money, basically. That's what Detroit's doing. She's letting them throw things at her because this is her art exhibit to get money, but it's more of a literal throwing. For Cash, it's kind of like a internal throwing. Anyways, his cut still bleeds.
Yes. So it gets worse. And then I guess the next thing that would happen would be he goes to this party that is being thrown by the CEO of Worry Free. It's played by Armie Hammer. It's Steve Lift. And so he's going to Steve Lift's party. And the first scene that we get to kind of meet Steve Lift, I would say, versus just seeing him like on a television interview in the background, would be he's just doing just a massive line of cocaine. It's the first time we get introduced to him. And then after that happens, immediately then the party starts. And so it's kind of like the other power callers are there, some other people are there, and he's just like a stereotypical kind of corrupt CEO where he's just, drug addict around a lot of like promiscuous women, you could say. He's just like your stereotypical just rich white guy, we'll say.
Sandals, drugs, the whole thing.
The whole nine is what he is.
Yeah.
And so it's really interesting, this party. It's definitely interesting. I mean, Cassius still has his head wound and everything. And so then after you get the kind of vibe of the party, you'll say, they go all into this other room. It's everyone at the party, and they're all like sitting down. And then they make Cassius sit at the front of everyone. And it's almost like, it looks like story time. And so it's so weird. And Steve Lift is like, oh, like, you don't need to use your white voice around us. Like, have you ever shot anyone? Like, tell us about it. Like, can you rap? They do all these like, grossly stereotypical type questions, and they just expect him to have shot someone to be able to rap and do all this stuff.
Yeah, it's so ridiculous. And then like he pretends to start rapping, and
Mhm.
like he rhymes, he does the whole thing, and then
Who's
he
that
just
though? I mean, he even said like, "I can't rap. I'm not good at
yeah,
it."
yeah. And also I've never shot anyone. And
Yeah.
so and then no one seems really interesting, so then he just starts cussing, and they all just like start cussing with him, and he says
Uh-huh.
this very derogatory term, and
Mhm.
they all just kind of repeat after him, and he's just like, as he's saying, he's like, why am I doing this? But
Yeah,
he's
like, why am I
letting himself,
pandering to them?
yeah,
Mhm.
which again goes back to this whole like he's subjecting himself to this, like just as
Mhm.
Detroit was letting all those people throw things at her. So very interesting, very
It was.
funny, but
It
also
was
very strange.
yeah.
Like,
It was
mhm,
interesting. So then I
mhm,
guess after Cassius's kind of rap scene where he essentially performs a concert for them and he just has like one word the whole time, just a
mhm,
racial slur the whole time, and they're like, "This is
mhm.
so good! Like you're a natural born artist."
Yeah.
After that, Steve Lift invites Cassius to a back room. And he's like, "Oh, like I think that you would do great at Worry Free. Like I want you to leave the Power Callers and like come work for Worry Free. Just essentially make another next step, another type promotion." And he's like, "Watch this video, and then like we'll talk about it." And I think this was after the fact that I think Steve Lift offered him a line of cocaine to do, and Cassius does it. He's a little apprehensive at first, but he does it eventually. And
Mhm.
then Steve Lift wants to show him a video to watch. And Cassius is like, "Oh, but like I have to go to the bathroom. Like, can I go to the bathroom first?" And Steve Lift is like, "Okay, but it's behind like the J door or something. Like, go behind the
Mhm.
J door in the down the hall." And so Cassius goes to use the bathroom, and he goes behind the olive door. Apparently, it was like the wrong
Yeah.
shade of green to go behind.
And before we get to this part, which
Yeah,
is
I'll have
where,
you talk about this part.
As Megan mentioned earlier, was very the twist at the end. I just want to once again plug in at Boca Tribune, Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter, just because before we get to this whole crazy part, again, at Boca Tribune, Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter. Also, our YouTube channel if you want to watch this again. And again,
Yeah.
hear this creepy part that comes next.
Mm-hmm.
Megan, you can go on about it if you'd
Oh,
like.
all right, go ahead. So essentially, it's just he walks into this room behind the olive door, and it's just like it looks like a kind of like a bathroom, but there's only one stall it seems that he's facing, and all you hear is the person is asking, "Oh, help me, can you help me?" And Cassius is like, "Absolutely not. I'm not going to help a stranger in the bathroom. Like you can handle it yourself." And so the person behind the door keeps begging and begging. He's like, "Oh, I'm in pain. Like, please, you have to help me." And Cassius is like, "Oh, okay, like, sure." And so he opens the door, and a horse person falls out of this bathroom stall. It's like
Repeat,
yeah, a
a
horse person.
horse person.
Yep, that's not. I didn't say it wrong. It's not a glitch. You're hearing me correctly. It's a horse and human combination. It falls out of the stall, and it's just at this point in the movie, I was like, where is this going? What's happening right now?
Like, what is going
Yeah,
on?
what am I watching at this point? But
Mhm.
don't worry, it's important. It's very important to the overall storyline. And so
Yeah.
Cassius, rightfully so, freaks out, screams, like backs up. There's more horse people. They're like, "Oh, help us, help us. Like, we're in pain. You have to help us." Cassius kind of backs out of the room and runs into Steve Lift again, who's now holding a gun and was like, "I told you it was the J door. Like, why didn't you go through the J door? Like, you weren't supposed to go through that door." And so he leads him at gunpoint back to the room, and he's like, "Oh, like, do you have to go to the bathroom anymore?" He's like, "No, I peed my pants, obviously." So I don't know if it was just funny because I have a juvenile sense of humor. So
It
I
was
think
ridiculous.
it was.
And then Steve Lift was like, "Okay, well, calm down. Like, come back to the office. Like, I'll show you this promotional video. Like, don't worry about it." And so Cash is like, "No, I gotta go. Like, I can't be here. Like, I'm freaked out." And so Steve Lift has a gun, and he's like, "No, you're gonna watch this promotional video. You still
Mhm.
work for me." And so they go to back to his office, and we see this very strange promotional video essentially explaining how Steve Lift, the CEO, and his scientists, whatever,
Yeah, sure.
created this, I guess, serum that kind of creates people into these horse people, because they were explaining how, you know, the people who use like weapons or instruments or whatever, the instruments are essentially an extension of themselves, and so they wanted to make people that could that didn't need instruments, but themselves were these weapons or whatever, strong, and they had a lot of endurance because they were like worry-free workers. You know, they're normal humans. They get tired after a while. We need people who never get tired. So they make them into these horse people, all these worry-free workers, and it's so creepy. Cash is like, absolutely not. I do not want to be involved in this. And so Steve Lift says this very interesting thing where he says, I have a proposition for you. A 5-year contract where I will turn you into one of these creepy looking horse people, and you are going to essentially be their leader because they're going to eventually rebel. That happens every time you create this new kind of society of people, and we need someone to be the leader of this rebellion that we can control. And already in itself very corrupt to think about. And then he says you can be their Martin Luther King, and like that was just like a whole like, no.
We can spend a whole half an hour just breaking that down.
That entire line down itself. And so Cash is like, absolutely not. Like, I will not be your two-sided leader. Like, this is wrong. And so again, it comes down to this money thing where, you know, they write the money down on the piece of paper, they hand it to him, they hand it to Cash, and he's like, no. I still say no. Yeah. And it's actually funny. I actually have like a poster of it on my wall where he gives him a note that literally says, I am offering you $10 million or $100 million, and like a little smiley face at the bottom, and it just gives it to him, and he's like, no.
Absolutely not. No.
Absolutely not. So Cash gets out of there. He gets out of there.
Yeah. And I will mention at this point though, kind of the activation serum thing is like, it's in a powdered kind of form, and so Cassius was worried initially. He said, like, what did you give me? Like, I don't even feel the effects of cocaine. Like, I don't feel anything. Like, what did you give me? Like, did you give me activation serum? And Steve Lift assures him, he's like, no, like, absolutely not. Like, you don't feel anything because you're freaking out right now. Your adrenaline is really high. Like, sit down. And then that's when, you know, he gets him to watch the video and all this stuff. And I do think that little paper, because before, like in the power collar type thing, you know, when they showed him the salary, we didn't really see what it was. But now we saw this, you know, the $100 million in the smiley face. Like,
yeah, and he was like,
no. Yeah, so now it's showing that, like, even this insane amount of money, Cassius is now kind of coming to his senses in a sort, you know.
But also you think about it, and it's still because it's affecting him, because they're asking him to turn himself into a horse.
Yeah, so I was like, you can kind of see it, but not really.
Yeah, and so, like, I guess, you know, it affects him, but I'm sure if he was like, you don't have to be the leader, you just found this out by accident, he would be freaked out, but he would go back to work there the next day. You know what I mean? So now that it affects him, that they're asking him to do this, he's like, no way. He's freaking out. He's terrified of turning into a horse person. He gets to his apartment and he calls like a newspaper company, and the newspaper company doesn't believe him, like, because he wants to out them. They think it's like a joke, and like he's like, the guy on the phone is like, is this my friend? Like, are you pranking me right now? And Cash is like, no, and they hang up. And so then he calls Detroit, and Detroit, he's like freaking out. He starts crying, and he's like, I'm terrified. Like, this was so creepy. Rightfully so. Very human reaction. I think I would react even worse than that, honestly.
Me too.
It's traumatizing to see a horse person and like whatever, and think that you're going to turn into a horse person. It's pretty creepy. And so they're like freaking out. And he asks Detroit to like look at his nostrils to see if they get bigger, because the horse people had bigger nostrils. And it was just insane. And so Detroit was like, you were calling me a million times last night. And Cash was like, no, I left my phone. I dropped it. I lost it. And he left it in the bathroom where he saw those horse people. And so Detroit looks at the messages that she got from Cash that night, and it was a video of the horse people saying like, help, like, you know, we're stuck here, we need your help. And then it's like Steve Lift saying like, get in your cages, like, why are you out? Like, very aggressively, kind of funny, in a funny way though.
Yeah,
it was like, why are you being so aggressive? He was like, I'm gonna turn you guys into glue. Like,
yeah, like it's a weird threat, like glue. I don't know. Yeah, it's just interesting to think about. So essentially, now that Cash and Detroit have this kind of clear-cut evidence, now Cassius is going to go on the offensive in a sense and go on all these talk shows and try to expose Worry-Free. And at this point in the movie, you can see his head wound is starting to heal. He takes off the bandage. It's not bleeding excessively anymore. It's just still like a little scratch now. So he's going on all these talk shows, and he goes on that one reality show, you know, the aggressive one where people are getting beat up on live television. And in order for his message to be heard, he himself has to get beat up and jump in, you know, a tank of gross things, we'll say. And so at this point, we are going to pause really quickly for a quick little ad, but we'll be right back to show Cash's debut of the Horse People video on the reality show. We'll be right back. All right, welcome back. So where we left off, Cash was on the television show, and he's about to show the advertisement, or not the advertisement, sorry, the video of the Horse People. And so, you know, once this happens and he goes on all these talk shows and he does all this stuff, no one cares. In fact, Worry-Free and Steve Lift specifically are praised for this. They're like, wow, so inventive, like such a good idea, all of this. And I think it's just interesting to think about that in this kind of, go ahead.
I was just going to say, it wasn't even like that they praised him for it. They were like, this is a scientific achievement. Like they figured out how to just shape shift humans and change their DNA, which is just insane. Like that they were praising him for that. But continue.
No, I was just about to say that, you know, in this kind of capitalist society that they're in the movie, I mean, they don't even care that these are people. These are worry-free employees that are now being turned into horses. Like it's not just you know, anyone random. They're actual people, and now they're horse people, and no one is talking about that or thinking about that at all. And so I think at this point, I mean, I believe a little bit earlier in the movie, throughout this whole kind of crusade between Cash and Detroit and everyone trying to expose Worry-Free's practices of these horse people, Detroit creates kind of a sculpture more or less alluding to the creation of horse people, we'll say. And so there's like a little mini crowd standing outside of it in front of like the Worry-Free building. And they're like, oh, like, what do you think it means? Like, what does this symbolize? And I think that it's interesting that, you know, Detroit chooses to say in this moment, she's like, oh, well, maybe the artist is being literal. And I think that not only speaks to, you know, the statue she created, but just in general, I guess maybe even the point of the movie, you could say. So I guess we can go from there and talk about how now Cash, you know, is no longer, he's still corrupt, but now he's joining the strike we can talk about next.
Yeah, so the strike is technically, it's called, what is it, the Left Eye something?
Yeah, like those are the names of the people that are, you know, kind of protesting against Worry-Free specifically and just, I guess, in general.
And so essentially they have this huge protest. Now Cash is no longer associated with Regal View. He quit, I guess, never really formally, but I think after seeing the horses, he was kind of like, nope. And so they have this protest outside of Regal View, and they're all wearing these Coca-Cola and Smile hats, which is just Cash's hair with a Coca-Cola bottle sticking out of it, because again, they capitalized off of his pain and off of this video. And so you know, basically a bunch of havoc wreaks. Like it goes crazy. These SWAT teams come to put down the protest. Is insane. And then someone like knocks out Cash, and like I don't remember who, but someone knocks him out.
I don't think we saw.
Captures him and like puts him in the back of a van. So Cash just kind of like passes out, and then you see like the end of this whole protest, and you see the horse people come escape essentially, and they come to save Cash, and they take him out of this van and like help him. And it was very funny, and like it kind of all you could hear in the background as they were saving Cash, they were like, the horse people saved us, the horse people saved us, the Worry-Free workers saved us. So it was like very interesting. Like these are their new heroes.
Yeah, they're like superheroes.
People that they never saw as heroes before. It was kind of funny because at one point he was like equestrian. What was it like? Equestrians, equisapiens. Like it was so ridiculous. But yeah, so you could see the weird turn this movie took, but
Yeah,
it
it
still
did.
means, like, yeah. So I thought that was a
Mhm.
funny scene.
No, I
And
think so as
so
well.
after that, he's trying to get his life back to normal. He gives his car to his friend, his like fancy car. He moves back into his uncle's garage. He's back with Detroit. Everything's good, right? And he mentions at one point that he will go back to Regalview and work there, which I thought was interesting. Like,
No,
why
so
is
did
he going
I.
back there? Which again further proves that, like, this whole, no matter what, it's all for money, basically. Like, he
Hmm.
still wants his money. So he goes back to Regalview. But anyways, he's back in this his uncle's garage. He's with Detroit, and as they're going in, they're making a joke about the sun exploding and life ending, because earlier in the movie, him and Detroit were talking about how you know how, what's his name, Cash never had a
Yeah.
purpose, and how he felt like he never made his mark, and like he thought about dying and like the sun exploding, and he said specifically the sun exploding. And that's when Detroit was like, oh, you're ridiculous. And then later Detroit like makes fun of him and mocks him and is like, oh, the sun is going to explode, and so they go into the garage, and at first you think that Cash like hits his nose on the garage door,
Yeah.
only to see him turn around and see his nostrils become horse nostrils, and he is transforming into these Equisapiens, and that's how the movie almost ends. And there's an end scene.
Yeah, you thought that's when it ended. And I think it's interesting, I think Dina and I were discussing before the show and how, when Steve Lift told him, oh, this isn't the activation serum, we both believed him initially.
Mm-hmm.
I was like, oh, okay, like, whoo, phew, good.
Yeah, good, yeah.
But then it turns out that it was the activation serum, and now he is a full-blown Equisapien at the end of the movie. So at the end of the movie, you see Steve Lift like sitting in his house, and then you're like, what is it? I guess on his little security camera, you see gets knocked down, and the horse people, the Cash leading the group, and then the other horse people break in, and that's how the movie ends. So they break down the door to Steve Lift's house. And so it's just an interesting ending, but an interesting turn in general with the horse people. But it was funny, it was symbolic, it was interesting. It was
very strange turn, but for the best. And I hope that Cash got his serum and is no longer a horseman.
Yeah, but
but you never know. Yeah, but it was a very good movie. Again, symbolic, very pretty. The art, the colors, the directing, incredible. The overall theme of it was really good. The director is Boots Riley. You should all look him up if you ever have the time. Very interesting man. And I think that's all.
Well, I would like to spend a minute, talking about the actual.
Okay, go ahead.
Sorry to bother you, but I want to spend a minute talking about the name of the movie itself. So I think it's interesting, the director himself has spoken on this, to where it's, sure, sorry to bother you is kind of what Cassius says every time he makes a telemarketing call. He's like, hi, like, Cassius Green here, like, sorry to bother you, but, and then he'll say his kind of telemarketing spiel. But it's also kind of in a way of the movie itself saying, sorry to bother you, but this is what's happening, in a sense. You know what I mean when I say that? Like, I think it's just interesting the way that they go about that. And the Equisapiens themselves, I mean, it's just showing that this society only view them as an avenue for labor and not as actual individual people.
And profit.
And profit, exactly. Yeah. So that is interesting. And then even the names of the characters themselves are also important. Like how Dina mentioned earlier, Cash is Green. And he says, his nickname is Cash. Mr. Blank, like Mr. Bleep, his name isn't even important. It's just kind of,
They literally bleep it out. Like
they do. They bleep it out.
Noise when you curse. Like
it's just interesting because, I mean, you would say like, oh, maybe his name is a curse word, but like they curse freely throughout the movie and nothing else is bleep except for his name, kind of showing how like it's not important what his name is. His only importance is kind of how he serves the company and what he does in his labor kind of area. So I think that it's just interesting. And even like Detroit's name. I mean, we could talk all day about kind of deeper meanings and stuff, but I guess overall, I enjoyed it. I recommend it. It was weird. It was funny. Definitely, if you're gonna recommend it to your friend, preface with like it's kind of weird though, but it's good.
Good, yeah.
Yeah, I enjoyed it. So I guess that's all that I have. Dina, that's all that you have?
Yep.
Perfect. Well, we will be back here next week, Tuesday, 7 p.m. We're going to be reviewing Zodiac on Netflix, so make sure to come back for that. Watch it over, throughout the week, over the weekend, and we'll be here next Tuesday.
Mm-hmm.
All right.
And
bye.
once again, don't forget to follow all our social medias.
Yes.
Bye.
All right, now bye.